Dad said I couldn't work. Now he regrets choosing my brother. You're a woman. You can't work in this business. Those words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Dad didn't even look up from his mahogany desk when he said it, just kept signing documents like he was discussing the weather. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office at Hartwell & Associates, casting long shadows across the Persian rug where I stood frozen. I'm Ava Hartwell, and I just graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law School. Not just graduated, I finished first in my class, broke 3 academic records, and had law firms from Boston to Los Angeles begging for my attention. But none of that mattered to the man who'd raised me. Let your brother handle the family business, sweetheart, he continued, finally glancing up with those steel-gray eyes that had intimidated opposing counsel for 30 years. You're not built for this world. Find yourself a nice husband, maybe volunteer at the country club. That's what your mother did. The rage started as a small flame in my stomach and spread through my veins like wildfire. I thought about the sleepless nights I'd spent in the law library while my classmates partied. The relationships I'd sacrificed, the social events I'd missed, the years I'd poured into becoming the lawyer I knew I could be. All so I could stand here and be dismissed like some fragile flower. But Dad, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, what about Jake? He barely passed his bar exam on the 3rd try. Last week, he spent an entire client meeting talking about the Patriots' playoff chances. My father's expression didn't change. He straightened his Harvard law class ring, the same school I'd just conquered, and leaned back in his leather chair. Jake is my son. This firm has been in the Hartwell family for 3 generations, and it'll stay that way. He'll learn what he needs to know. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just being passed over, I was being erased. In his mind, I didn't exist as a lawyer, as a potential leader, as anything more than a pretty accessory to parade around at firm holiday parties. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, I could hear the familiar sounds of downtown Boston, car horns, sirens, the pulse of a city that never stopped fighting. That's when I realized I had a choice. I could accept this verdict and fade into the background of my own life, or I could show him exactly what he was throwing away. I see, I said quietly, my voice steady as granite. Thank you for making this so clear. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the office window, a young woman in a sharp navy suit, briefcase in hand, fire in her eyes. Dad had no idea he'd just declared war on the wrong person. The elevator ride down felt like descending into hell. Each floor that passed marked another year of dreams crumbling, another memory of late nights studying corporate law while imagining the day I'd walk these halls as a partner. By the time I reached the lobby, my hands were shaking with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. I drove my Honda Civic through the winding streets of Beacon Hill in a daze, past the brick townhouses and gaslit sidewalks that had been my playground as a child. Everything looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted. The world I'd known, where hard work and excellence mattered, had revealed itself to be an illusion. Mom was in the kitchen when I walked through the front door of our colonial home, arranging white lilies in a crystal vase. She looked up with that knowing expression I'd seen 1,000 times before, the one that said she understood pain even when she couldn't fix it. He said no, didn't he? She asked softly, not really a question. I couldn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. The tears I'd been holding back since the office finally spilled over, and Mom wrapped me in her arms like she had when I was 7 and scraped my knee riding bikes with Jake. I'm so sorry, honey, she whispered into my hair. Your father, he thinks he's protecting you from a world that eats people alive. He doesn't understand that you're stronger than that world. Protecting me from what? I finally managed to choke out. From being successful? From using the brain God gave me. Mom pulled back and looked at me with eyes that held 30 years of her own suppressed dreams. From failing. From being hurt. From facing the same battles I fought when I wanted to be a doctor. She paused, smoothing a strand of hair from my face. He's wrong, Ava. But he's scared of losing you to a world he can't control. That night, I sat in my old bedroom surrounded by law school textbooks and achievement awards, making the hardest decision of my life. I pulled out my laptop and started typing resignation letters, not just from the firm, but from this entire life that had been planned for me since birth. By dawn, I had packed everything that mattered into 2 suitcases. My law degree, my bar exam results, the letter of recommendation from Professor Williams that called me the most promising legal mind of her generation. I left behind the childhood photos, the family vacation memories, the silver jewelry that had been my grandmother's. As I loaded my car, Jake stumbled out the front door in yesterday's clothes, still half drunk from whatever bar he'd closed down the night before. "Where are you going, sis?" he slurred, squinting in the morning sunlight. "To build the life Dad thinks I can't handle," I said, slamming the trunk shut. He sobered up enough to look confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" I turned to face my little brother, the golden boy who'd never had to prove himself, never had to earn his place at the table. "It means you're about to find out what it's like to carry the family legacy all by yourself. Good luck, Jake. You're going to need it." The last thing I saw in my rearview mirror was Mom standing in the doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other raised in a small wave goodbye. New York City hit me like a tidal wave of possibility and terror. I'd found a studio apartment in Hell's Kitchen that was roughly the size of my old walk-in closet, but it was mine. No family portraits judging me from the walls, no expectations weighing down the air, just me and the hunger to prove everyone wrong. The interview at Morrison, Sterling & Associates was supposed to be a long shot. They were one of Manhattan's most prestigious corporate law firms, the kind of place that usually recruited from Harvard but had already filled their spots before my dramatic exit from Boston. I'd called in a favor from Professor Williams, who knew someone, and somehow landed 30 minutes to make my case. "Ms. Hartwell," said Catherine Sterling, the senior partner whose silver hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon. "Your academic record is impressive, but you understand we typically don't hire mid-year associates. Why should we make an exception?" I sat forward in the leather chair, meeting her gaze directly. "Because I don't just want to practice law, I want to win. I want it so badly that I left my family's firm to prove I belong in this profession. That kind of hunger doesn't come along every day." She raised an eyebrow. "Left your family's firm? That's quite a sacrifice." "It wasn't a sacrifice," I said, feeling the truth of it as the words left my mouth. "It was an investment in my future." 2 days later, I got the call. I was starting Monday as a junior associate, bottom of the food chain, drowning in document review and coffee runs. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I was being judged on my merit, not my gender or my last name. The work was brutal. 18-hour days were standard, weekends were mythical, and my social life consisted of nodding at the night janitor who emptied my trash can at 2 a.m. But every case I touched, every brief I wrote, every argument I crafted, I poured everything into it like my life depended on the outcome. And slowly, people started to notice. "Hartwell, I need you on the Blackstone merger," barked James Morrison, the founding partner who rarely acknowledged associates existed. "The opposing counsel is trying to bury us in paperwork, but I hear you're good at finding needles in haystacks." Within 6 months, I'd helped secure 3 major settlements and had been assigned to the firm's highest-profile cases. The other associates started coming to me for advice. Partners requested me by name. I was becoming the lawyer I'd always known I could be, the one my father had been too blind to see. But late at night in my tiny apartment, eating takeout Chinese food and reviewing contracts, I couldn't shake the hollow feeling in my chest. Success tasted different when you had no one to share it with. Every victory felt incomplete without my mother's proud smile or even Jake's grudging respect. Then one Tuesday morning, everything changed. Morrison called me into his office with a grim expression and a manila folder that would turn my world upside down. "I've got a malpractice case," he said, sliding the folder across his desk. "Big one. The client is claiming inadequate representation that cost them millions in a botched acquisition. The opposing firm has a reputation for playing dirty, using family connections instead of competence." I opened the folder and felt my blood turn to ice. There, in bold letters across the letterhead, was the name I'd been running from, Hartwell and Associates. My hands trembled as I stared at the case file. The client was Meridian Industries, a tech company that had hired Hartwell and Associates to handle their acquisition of a smaller firm. According to the complaint, Jake had missed critical regulatory filings, misinterpreted key contract clauses, and generally bungled the deal so badly that Meridian lost $43 million when the acquisition fell through. "You know something about this firm," Morrison observed, watching my face carefully. "Your reaction tells me you understand how they operate." I closed the file and looked up at him, my mentor, the man who'd given me a chance when my own father wouldn't. "I know them better than anyone. And I know their weaknesses." "Good. Because they've been getting away with sloppy work for years, trading on their reputation instead of earning it. This case could finally hold them accountable. He leaned forward. I'm putting you in charge, Hartwell. Show me what you're made of. The irony wasn't lost on me, a Hartwell taking down Hartwell and Associates. For 3 days, I walked around Manhattan in a daze, coffee growing cold in my hands as I wrestled with what this meant. I'd left Boston to escape my family's shadow, but fate had just handed me a spotlight to cast that shadow even darker. I called Mom that night, something I'd been doing less and less as the months passed. Her voice sounded tired, older somehow. Ava, sweetheart, how are you? We miss you so much. I miss you too, Mom. How's the firm doing? There was a long pause. Your father won't admit it, but things have been difficult. Jake tries so hard, but he's not you, honey. He's made some mistakes. My heart clenched. What kind of mistakes? Big ones. There's talk of lawsuits, clients leaving. Your father spends most nights in his study, staring at that photo of you graduating law school. Her voice broke slightly. He knows he was wrong, Ava. He's just too proud to say it. I closed my eyes, picturing Dad alone in his study, facing the consequences of choosing pride over wisdom. Part of me wanted to reach out, to offer help, to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. But another part, the part that remembered his dismissive words, his blind faith in Jake's incompetence, burned with the need for vindication. Mom, I need to tell you something. My firm is taking a case against Hartwell and Associates. A malpractice suit. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Ava, she finally whispered. What have we done to our family? 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a conference room at Morrison, Sterling & Associates, reviewing depositions with our client team, when my assistant knocked on the door. Ms. Hartwell? The opposing counsel from Hartwell & Associates is here for the settlement discussion. My stomach dropped. I'd known this moment was coming, but I'd somehow convinced myself it would be Dad leading the defense. Instead, when the conference room door opened, Jake walked in wearing an ill-fitting suit and the expression of a man drowning in responsibilities too big for him. Our eyes met across the polished table, and I saw my little brother, the one who used to beg me to help with his homework, who'd once confided that he never wanted to be a lawyer but didn't know how to tell Dad, transform into my opponent. Hello, Jake, I said quietly. Ava. His voice was hoarse. I didn't know you were. Dad said you were in New York, but I didn't think. You didn't think I'd be good enough to make it at a firm like this? He flinched. That's not what I meant. Morrison cleared his throat. Shall we begin? We have a lot to discuss. The courtroom felt like a gladiator arena, and I was about to face my own blood. 3 months of preparation had led to this moment, me sitting at the plaintiff's table in my sharpest black suit, Jake at the defense table looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. The case was ironclad. Jake had missed filing deadlines, misinterpreted SEC regulations, and failed to catch a liability clause that should have been obvious to any first-year law student. But knowing I was right didn't make it easier to watch my brother's reputation crumble in real time. Your Honor, I began my opening statement, the evidence will show that the defendant firm's negligence wasn't just professional incompetence, it was a pattern of putting family loyalty above client welfare. From the gallery, I could feel eyes boring into the back of my head. I didn't need to turn around to know Dad was there, watching his daughter systematically destroy the firm he'd built and the son he'd chosen to inherit it. The first 2 days of testimony went exactly as I'd predicted. Expert witnesses confirmed that Jake's errors were inexcusable, former Hartwell and Associates employees testified about the firm's declining standards, and our financial analyst demonstrated how $43 million had evaporated due to incompetence. But it was day 3 that broke my heart. Jake took the stand in his father's defense, and I watched him fall apart in real time. Under cross-examination, he confused basic legal principles, cited statutes that didn't exist, and finally, in a moment that made the courtroom gasp, admitted he'd never actually read the regulatory framework governing the Meridian acquisition. Mr. Hartwell, I said gently, my voice carrying across the silent courtroom, how many hours did you spend preparing for this case? His face crumpled. I don't know. I tried, Ava. I really tried, but it's all so complicated, and Dad kept saying I'd figure it out, and I just... Your Honor, interrupted Jake's attorney, I'd like to request a brief recess. But the damage was done. My brother, the golden boy who'd inherited everything I'd been denied, had just confessed his incompetence in front of a packed courtroom. The journalists in the gallery were scribbling furiously, already crafting headlines that would destroy what was left of the Hartwell name. During the recess, I found myself in the courthouse bathroom, staring at my reflection and fighting back tears. This wasn't supposed to feel like a funeral. I was supposed to be triumphant, vindicated, finally proving my worth. Instead, I felt like I was presiding over the death of my own family. When court reconvened, Jake's attorney announced they were prepared to discuss settlement terms. The number we agreed on was staggering, enough to compensate Meridian for their losses and send a message to every law firm that traded on reputation instead of competence. As the judge dismissed us, I finally turned to look at the gallery. Dad sat in the back row, his usually perfect posture bent with defeat. Our eyes met for the first time in over a year, and I saw something I'd never seen before in those steel-gray depths: recognition. Not of his daughter, but of the lawyer I'd become. He stood slowly and walked toward me, each step seeming to cost him years of his life. When he reached the plaintiff's table, he extended his hand. "Counselor Hartwell," he said formally, his voice barely audible. "Well done." I stared at his outstretched hand, the same hand that had signed my Harvard diploma, that had refused to shake mine the day I left Boston, that was now acknowledging me as an equal for the first time in my life. But as I reached out to take it, I realized something had broken between us that couldn't be fixed with a handshake and a professional courtesy. The father who'd raised me was gone, replaced by this stranger who'd needed to see me destroy his chosen heir before he could see me at all. The legal blogs exploded within hours. Harvard law graduate destroys father's firm in devastating malpractice win. Family dynasty crumbles as daughter proves father wrong. The headlines made me sound like some avenging angel of justice, finally getting the recognition I deserved. Back at Morrison, Sterling & Associates, they threw me a celebration dinner at the Four Seasons. Partners who'd barely acknowledged my existence 6 months earlier were now calling me brilliant, a rising star, the future of the firm. Catherine Sterling pulled me aside during dessert. "Ava, that was masterful work. Cold, calculated, and absolutely ruthless, exactly what this profession demands." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm recommending you for senior associate. Full partnership track." I should have been ecstatic. This was everything I'd worked for, dreamed of, sacrificed for. But as I smiled and accepted congratulations from colleagues, all I could think about was Jake's face when he'd broken down on the witness stand. The way his voice had cracked when he'd called me by name instead of opposing counsel. My tiny Hell's Kitchen apartment felt smaller than ever that night. I sat on my futon with a glass of wine, surrounded by case files and legal briefs, and realized I'd built exactly the life I'd claimed to want. Successful career, respected position, financial independence. I'd proven every doubter wrong. So why did it feel like I'd lost everything that mattered? My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Saw the news. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I stared at the message for 10 minutes before typing back, "I won." "I know," came her immediate reply. "But are you okay?" I couldn't answer that question, not honestly. So I set the phone aside and tried to focus on work, but the words blurred together on the pages. Every contract clause reminded me of the acquisition Jake had botched. Every legal precedent brought back memories of childhood debates at the dinner table, when Dad would quiz us on famous cases and I'd always know the answers. The next morning brought a call I'd been expecting but dreading. "Ms. Hartwell? This is Rebecca from Hartwell & Associates. Mr. Hartwell, your father, would like to schedule a meeting with you. He says it's important." My stomach clenched. "What kind of meeting?" "He wouldn't say, ma'am. Just that he needs to speak with you privately." He was very insistent. I almost said no. Part of me wanted to let him sit with the consequences of his choices, to finally understand what it felt like to be dismissed and ignored. But the daughter in me, the one who'd once worshipped the ground he walked on, couldn't ignore the vulnerability I'd heard in his voice during that courthouse handshake. "Tell him I'll meet him," I said finally. "But not at the firm. Neutral ground." We agreed on a small cafe in Cambridge, halfway between his world and mine. As I hung up, I realized I was about to have the conversation I'd been avoiding for over a year, the one that would either rebuild the bridge between us or burn it down completely. Either way, it was time to face the man who'd created me and then tried to deny my existence. Time to find out if Robert Hartwell was ready to meet his daughter as an equal, or if he was still the man who believed women belonged in the background of other people's stories. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few Harvard students nursing coffee and laptops. I spotted Dad immediately. He sat in the corner booth we'd occupied countless times during my law school years, when he'd still believed I might make a good legal secretary someday. He looked older than I remembered, gray threading through his dark hair, new lines carved around his eyes. But he still wore that perfectly tailored navy suit like armor, still carried himself with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. Ava. He stood when I approached, that old-fashioned courtesy I'd inherited from him. Thank you for coming. I slid into the booth across from him, noting how his hands shook slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. Robert Hartwell, the man who'd once argued cases before the Supreme Court, was nervous to talk to his own daughter. You wanted to see me, I said, keeping my voice professional, distant. Here I am. He studied my face like he was seeing me for the first time. You look like your mother when she was your age. That same fire in your eyes, that same refusal to back down. He paused. I fell in love with that fire. I should have recognized it in you. Should have, could have, would have, I replied coolly. We're way past hypotheticals, Dad. Yes, he said quietly. We are. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. Ava, I asked you here because I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a year ago. My stomach tightened. What? The firm is failing. He said it simply, like announcing the weather. We've lost 60% of our clients in the past 6 months. 3 more malpractice suits have been filed since Meridian. Jake. He stopped, swallowed hard. Jake tried to handle a merger last month. The client fired us after he confused Delaware corporate law with Massachusetts tax code. I felt no satisfaction in hearing this, just a hollow ache where vindication should have been. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. No, you're not. And you shouldn't be. He leaned forward. I did this, Ava. I chose pride over wisdom, tradition over talent. I handed my life's work to someone who didn't earn it and turned away the one person who could have carried on everything I built. He slid the folder across the table. I want you to come back. Not as an associate, not as Jake's assistant, but as senior partner. Your name on the letterhead, your vision guiding the firm. Hartwell and Hartwell. I stared at the folder without opening it. Inside I knew would be everything I'd dreamed of as a child, partnership papers, equity shares, the key to the kingdom I'd been locked out of. Everything I'd thought I wanted. Why now? I asked. Because your golden boy turned out to be fool's gold? Because you finally realize you need me to clean up his mess? Dad winced like I'd slapped him. Because I was wrong about everything. Because the daughter I raised to be brilliant and fierce and unstoppable deserves better than a father who was too blind to see her gifts. Because... His voice broke. Because I miss you, sweetheart. I miss my little girl who used to sit in my office and reorganize my case files. I miss the woman who graduated at the top of her class and looked at me like I was her hero. Tears blurred my vision. That little girl believed her father saw her as an equal. That woman thought she'd earned her place at your table. You destroyed both of them when you chose Jake. I know. He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of mine. I can't undo that choice, Ava. But I can make a new one. I can choose you now, the way I should have chosen you then. I looked down at the folder, then back at this man who'd shaped every ambition I'd ever had, every standard I'd ever held myself to. The father who'd taught me to fight for what I believed in, then couldn't believe I was worth fighting for. It's too late, Dad, I said softly. That eager young woman who wanted nothing more than your approval? She's gone. You made sure of that. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. What do you want, then? How do I fix this? I stood up, leaving the folder unopened on the table. You can't fix it. That's the point. You can't erase a year of proving myself to strangers while my own family saw me as invisible. You can't undo Jake's failures and suddenly make me the solution to problems you created. So that's it. His voice was barely a whisper. I lose both my children? The son who can't handle the work and the daughter who won't forgive me. I looked down at him one last time, this man who'd been my first hero and my greatest disappointment. You didn't lose me, Dad. You threw me away. There's a difference. As I walked toward the door, I heard him call my name one last time. I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm proud of you, he said. I know I never said it when it mattered, but I'm proud of the lawyer you became. The woman you became. Even if she's not my daughter anymore. I closed my eyes, feeling 28 years of love and resentment and hope and heartbreak wash over me. She was always your daughter, I said without turning around. You just couldn't see her. The Boston winter air hit my face as I stepped outside, cold and sharp and clean. Behind me lay the wreckage of a family dynasty, the ashes of dreams that had been built on the wrong foundation. Ahead of me stretched a life I'd built with my own hands, success I'd earned with my own mind, a future that belonged entirely to me. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, it felt like the most expensive victory I'd ever won, paid for with the love of the first man who'd ever believed in me, back when I was too young to know that belief could be conditional. But as I walked toward the subway that would carry me back to New York, back to the life I'd chosen over the life I'd been offered, I realized something had changed. I was no longer fighting to prove I deserved my father's respect. I was living like someone who deserved her own. And maybe, in the end, that was worth more than any family legacy could ever be.